Welcome. This video is documenting the predictions that the S&P 500 stock market index will crash 13% in one day on September 11th, 2026. Either this or the halting of trading will be triggered once the 13% threshold has been met. That's how the system works. Once the market declines 13% in one day, trading is temporarily halted. So it could be that because it's only temporary, once it reopens, I think after a half an hour, that the market could decline more than 13%. Either way, the S&P 500 will decline 13% or trading will be halted at the 13% loss on this day, September 11th, 2026. It is possible, although I don't really think so, that this 13% crash in one day will apply to the Dow or NASDAQ index. Could be multiple indexes. This video is also documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon will fall and injure his head on November 28th, and that US warships will be sunk by Iran on December 10th. And this will include 2 aircraft carriers. And it is also predicted that Pope Francis, the Antichrist, will be resurrected on May 2nd, 2029. The date that this video is posted on the social media platform you are watching it on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email by Google. If you are skeptical for some strange reason, please contact me and I will forward this to you. That said, it is ludicrous to conclude that I have an insider connection at all of these multiple platforms that would be somehow able to change the post date of the videos and also the timestamp of an email. All right. Now, this video regarding the central sign here, of course, every prophetic sign cannot be properly or fully understood without its connections and context with the other prophetic signs. And so there's a lot more in this video than just this Gordie Howe Bridge opening sign. But the Gordie Howe Bridge had a ceremonial open on July 24th this year, and the following day was the original production of this video. So a good portion of this video will have been recorded back on July 25th. Today is August 22nd. It is still prior to September 11th. The reason why I say that is that there are some things about the video that was produced on the 25th that need to be updated. Specifically, the prediction for Paul Simon and his fall and injury of his head. Because the way in which God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel, is that God will point to particular dates regarding a particular theme and prediction, in this case, Paul Simon's fall and injury of his head, and it is not necessarily possible to know ahead of time whether that date that he is pointing to will be a step in the trail of signs leading to that date or the end of the trail. In other words, the prediction coming to pass. If it isn't the prediction coming to pass that God is as to why God is pointing to the date, we expect clear and relevant signs related to that particular prediction to reveal further information which leads on down the path, down into the future, to the ultimate date on which this prediction will occur. In other words, as you will see in this video, God was pointing to July 26th, the day after the video was recorded, and 2 days after the Gordie Howe Bridge sign on the 24th. We, in fact, as expected, received the clear and relevant signs regarding Paul Simon's predicted fall on July 26th, and these signs revealed November 28th. All right, now you don't have to believe me, and I don't blame you if you don't, if you know nothing about this channel or how God signs works. But when this prediction comes to pass, it will prove everything that I have just said. Not only the prediction for the stock market on September 11th, but when Paul Simon falls and injures his head on November 28th, that will prove that I know more than you how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. And it is only being explained on this channel. And there are steps in the trail of signs. It's how it works. And it'll be proven to be true, or the case, when the prediction comes to pass. So stay tuned. Now that I have adequately explained what is going on here, you should not be confused during portions of this video that will talk about Paul Simon falling and injuring his head on July 26th. And there is updates regarding even the Gordie Howe Bridge and how it directly connects to November 28th, in fact. In case you're not picking it up yet, Paul Simon is the composer of Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is what this Gordie Howe Bridge sign is, as will be explained. So let's get into it. All right. I just want to really recommend that you go through this entire video. I mean, there's going to be parts that you may need to persevere through. I think personally it's all important, but keep going, listen to all of it, because there is a section later in the video that will talk about recent events. That is about the escalating trade war with Canada, specifically August 21st, when the Prime Minister of Canada walked away from the trade negotiations with the US. That's also extremely prophetic. It's all tied into this, and you want to hear it all. So I recommend going through this entire video. Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and injure his head on July 26th, 2026, and then go into a vegetative state. It is also predicted that in 2029, Pope Francis will be resurrected from the dead through demonic power. That's part of this video because of the relevance of the prophetic signs that I'll be explaining here regarding the Gordie Howe Bridge, the new bridge between Ontario and Detroit, Windsor, between Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan. This is a prophetic sign from God. Bridges are very symbolic, and I'll just explain as we go. So the reasons that I'll be explaining prove that this prediction is from God. I mean, this prediction, of course, is precise enough. And the documentation is here. I mean, well, for example, this email was composed on July 25th, but I have multiple videos documenting the prediction for Paul Simon long before July 25th. Furthermore, we've been following God's signs regarding Paul Simon for years. But this is like the last minute video because the sign just occurred on the 24th. And so I'm just getting around now to explaining it on the 25th and the predictions for the 26th. But we can see here anyway that the documentation here, the timestamp of the email, indicates that this prediction was known before the 26th, when it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall. So again, this prediction that he will fall on this specific date and injure his head, of course, is an extremely specific, precise prediction. And then after such a prediction, all I need to tell you is how I know, and the case is closed. But I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to do more than just simply tell you what it means. I'm going to show you how I know, which just further confirms what I will tell you as to the purpose of this prediction. The fact that I know far more than you or anyone how this prediction is known will prove the things that I say in these videos on this channel. And that is the purpose of the prediction. It isn't simply for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You were able to decipher God's signs and know that Paul Simon is going to fall on this date ahead of time. That's really cool. No, this is not the purpose of the prediction. And I know more than you the reason and purpose for the prediction, and it is to prove the controversial things that I say in these videos. I don't know how much controversy I'll be explaining in this particular video. This video will be short. It's just this one sign we'll be talking about. Nevertheless, the controversial things explained in all of the other videos will be proven when the prediction comes to pass. And the wise person will recognize that when the prediction comes to pass, they need to watch every single minute of every video on this channel. It is through these stories that God is telling, and this is just one small sliver of a story here in this video, that God is able to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And again, these stories and this knowledge that God is communicating is confirming the truth regarding these controversial things that I am saying. In other words, there is no debate, zero, regarding these controversial things. The first one to get out of the way, which is the obvious one. So this is really not the primary purpose in a way, but in a way it is the primary purpose. Because the reason why it wouldn't be is because there's already an overwhelming amount of information and evidence to prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible. So we want to get out of the way immediately that the reason and how I was able to know this prediction ahead of time, as the explanation in this video will demonstrate, the reasons for how I know, disproves the New Age religion. In other words, if you hold the New Age or consciousness revolution or collective consciousness, etc., Eastern religion worldview, which the vast majority of people in the West have today. If you ask the people in the West today if they believe in God, only about 13%, according to polls, will say that they are atheist. The overwhelming majority, depending on where you are, if you're outside of the Bible Belt, basically, will say yes, but not like the God of the Bible. He is, and most of these people don't really think about what they know or how they, or what they believe, and I can explain their worldview far better than they can. But they will tell you something like, if they're articulate enough, a collective consciousness. You know, God being an impersonal energy and the universe itself. And that will be disproven when this prediction comes to pass, and that is the purpose of the prediction. Make no mistake. I know far better than you how this prediction is known and the purpose of this prediction and why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And it is to tell you, enough is enough. It is time to quit this worldview. God is not an impersonal energy, and he is not the universe itself. God is holy, which is a Hebrew word that means separate from the creation. He is the creator of the creation. He isn't the creation itself. You're not correct. And that's the purpose of the prediction. It is to prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, and so this also, of course, disproves Islam and Jews that reject Jesus. Okay, God is a monotheistic, not pantheistic, which is these technical terms for what I've been talking about. Okay, so what we have here is this opening of the bridge. Bridges are important in general in God's signs here. And this is a profound thing given the timing of things and God's use of his trump, in this sign. Okay? So first of all, the number 4 symbolizes a door. The 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And Hebrew letters are symbols for things. This dates back to ancient times. So the 4th letter is the symbol for a door, which is the same metaphor or symbolism as a bridge in God's signs. So Canada, so this is the title of the New York Times article. As Canada opens Gordie Howe International Bridge, Americans are told to stay home. So the bridge opened, but only half of it, you could say. Because the Canadian side decided that they were going to arrogantly, and they are extremely arrogant, Canadians, arrogantly make a point regarding this bridge and go ahead with an opening that didn't include the U.S., as absurd as that is. And that's Canadians for you. They are absurd. And this bridge cost $6.4 million. And we know immediately through studying God's signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for almost a decade, that 64 hints at 4 times 4 times 4, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And so this is confirmation of what I just mentioned, which is that bridge equals door, which equals 4. We have a second witness to this. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination. And we have God's trumpeting on the same day in a 64-minute long speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The first one in which a shooter attempted to shoot him was extremely prophetic. And that, as I explained in that other video, points to, it was on the anniversary of Operation Eagle Claw, which was the attempt to extract the hostages in the 444-day hostage crisis in Iran. When Jimmy Carter sent 4+4 helicopters, which met unexpectedly a Habub dust storm, destroying 4 of the helicopters. 4 of them didn't return, in other words. And in the process, in the incident in the desert, there was a collision between the refueling plane and one of the helicopters, which killed 4+4 military personnel and injured 4. During this whole incident in the desert, they had to take captive an Iranian bus, which had 44 people on it. And the number of hostages they were attempting to extract was the 4 times 4th prime number. You can see a pattern here, obviously, clearly. The date the hostage crisis began, incidentally, also was on the date 11/4, which instead of 11 times 4 equals 44. The 444-day hostage crisis began on the first day of the 40th president's presidency. 44 years later exactly was the only other indoor inauguration since Reagan's 44 years earlier on January 1st, 2025, when Trumpet was inaugurated. Okay, so, yeah. The reason why I bring up the Operation Eagle Claw, which was the attempt to extract the hostages, is because God is using this as a prophetic sign, Operation Eagle Claw, as a parallel to what is coming, which is the attempt to extract the nuclear dust. And the dust is the big story about Operation Eagle Claw, because they encountered the Habub storm unexpectedly, and also when they arrived at their rendezvous outside of Tehran, before they went into Tehran, they never did go into Tehran, but because of what happened. But when they arrived, they unexpectedly arrived at their rendezvous point, or rather, they arrived at the rendezvous point and unexpectedly encountered ankle-deep dust that caused zero visibility, just like when the Eagle has landed on the moon, they encountered the moon dust, which created zero visibility. Which is why all of this coincided with the recent astronauts to the moon, 4 of them. That's another subject. I'm really getting off the trail here for this video now. But you see what I'm saying? It's just infinite. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is infinite because it is interconnected. And none of the full intended meaning of any of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs, which is something that the vast majority of those quote-unquote watchers for signs have, in general, not appreciated, and that's why the vast majority of the signs in general have been missed and are only being explained on this channel, including, I'm sure, for example, this prophetic sign, this Gordie Howe Bridge opening. Now, this controversial premier, which is the name of the office that's similar to the governor of Ontario, Doug Ford, hints at the force because D is the 4th letter. The name Doug is 4 letters, and Ford hints at 4. He conducted the ceremony, or he was the keynote speaker, if you will. He was the top leader at the ceremony. Okay, so him speaking at the ceremony for the opening of the bridge on half of the bridge, that's the story of him speaking. So this is part of the prophecy. And that's just more confirmation for the force here. This premier is the governor of Ontario, the capital city of which is the Tower of Babel city. Literally, it is a Tower of Babel city. It is not a Canadian city. It is the world city, just like the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible. And this city, Toronto, is made up of people speaking all kinds of different languages, just like the story of the Tower of Babel. And of course, this city's skyline is famous for its tower. It is the Tower of Babel city, symbolically in God's signs. Incidentally, I'm from this city, or in the suburbs of it, from birth till the end of high school. And so when I criticize Canadians, I have the ability to do so freely. I know them more than anyone, and it's finally, and speaking of which, it's about time. Finally, Americans are starting to wake up and realize how much they hate them and how arrogant Canadians are and how they really feel. They're not the innocent neighbor to the north like the Americans think. Because they don't know. And if they do know, you can expect this whole situation between these two peoples to escalate, as it should. As it should. These Canadians have no respect for Americans or American values or anything. They are completely arrogant. Most of them, especially in Ontario, especially in Eastern Canada. It's a different culture out west, just like within the US, we have different cultures. And so In other words, the unique thing about Canada, which is the unique thing in the entire world, is that its nationalism is leftist. Everywhere else in the world, the national movement is a right-of-center movement, but not in Canada. And the reason is because of anti-Americanism. It's this inferiority complex that compels them to see themselves as different and not American, and that they base on their liberal left values. So their left liberal values makes them quote unquote Canadian. The irony is that their left liberal values has made Canada not Canada anymore. As the Prime Minister said, Justin Trudeau, Canada is the first post-national country. So it's like a snake eating itself. It's not a country anymore, but the national movement has made it not a country. It's completely absurd. So, Howe died. Gordie Howe is this figure, and the bridge is named after him because he was born in Canada, but played the majority of his famous career in Detroit, just across the river. So he's like a dual citizen. So that's why it's appropriate to name this bridge after Gordie Howe, which connects Detroit to Canada. So Gordie Howe died on June 10th, 2016, exactly 528 weeks before this bridge story, the Gordie Howe Bridge. This has recently come to light that this is an important pattern God has established in his signs because of the last episode of the TV show Emergency. I'm not going to get into too much detail here about this show Emergency, okay? But the last episode was on the date 528, and that's why God is using this 528 number. The importance of the show Emergency is not just that it was a popular TV show for many years, but it pioneered the paramedic healthcare movement. When it first aired, there were just a handful of paramedic units in California, and there was, in many places around the country, none. Today, it's a main part of the healthcare industry. The healthcare service is including paramedics. Okay, so that's the show Emergency. It's important historically as well. Okay. So, yeah, we want to refrain from going into too much details regarding the specific things because it goes off onto tangents because God's signs is all interconnected. It's the same with the Bible, incidentally. This is what makes the Bible a profound supernatural document, is that it is infinite because one can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible. It is all interconnected. And those that take the time to learn about this are astounded how this is the case, and it's clearly supernatural because of this, because of its interconnectedness and all of these connections and parallels through the various books that were written centuries apart. In addition to its prophecy that also proves things, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, but as the case with God's prophetic science, it's all interconnected, and that's why it's amazing, and it's only being explained on this channel. So anyway, we have the pattern of 528. So I'm getting somewhere with this because Gordie Howe died exactly 126 months before the predicted emergency of U.S. warships off the coast of Iran during what will be a mission to extract the nuclear dust, as in the extraction of the hostages that encountered dust in Operation Eagle Claw. Which is why God connected Trump to the White House Correspondents' Dinner through the second White House Correspondents' Dinner, the makeup one, with his 64-minute-long speech on the day of the story involving opening half of the $6.4 billion bridge named Gordie Howe. And now we can see God has used Gordie Howe here to point to the coming emergency. Furthermore, this emergency that is predicted here will be on water, and this bridge is over water, which gets us to the theme of this particular sign, which is that this is a bridge over troubled water, because all of the stories about this opening of the bridge speak of the relations between the US and Canada. And there are people, the left media will be lamenting how this is unfortunate and it's all Trump's fault. No, it is not all Trump's fault. It is primarily Canada's fault. And it is a long time coming, and this isn't unfortunate. This is how it should be. There should be a trade war with this country, Canada. They do not deserve the respect that Americans give them. They are disrespectful. And arrogant, and take the relationship with the US for granted, etc. It is time that America stood up to this. So the point is that this is the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's not Trump's fault. That's ridiculous. Trump is speaking for Americans that have put off this debate with Canada for a long time, and these Canadians deserve whatever they get. And this is all bridge over troubled water. That's the theme here. This is the story. The mainstream news stories are about this opening of the bridge during this troubled time. It's a symbolic bridge over troubled water. Howe was known for playing with his two sons. The story is how his son spoke at the ceremony. So Gordie Howe's son is the big part of the story as well, because he spoke at the ceremony. Gordie Howe is no longer alive, so his son spoke at the ceremony at the bridge named after his father. Okay, but this is an important part of history because Gordie Howe is known for, at the end of his career, playing in the NHL with his two sons. An astounding thing. I do not believe that's ever been repeated in any other way in history of professional sports. And this isn't the first time this has come up because LeBron James recently played with his son, and that tied into Gordie Howe playing with his two sons. Okay, but he played with two sons, so the three of them played together professionally. Okay, that's why this bridge over troubled water story involving Gordie Howe is 2 days before the predicted fall of Paul Simon, who composed the famous song Bridge Over Troubled Water. Oh, I just realized something. That album is the 5th Simon and Garfunkel album, and I think it won 5 Grammys, and this sign is 5 days after the World Cup that pointed to Psalm chapter 2, as I explained in the other videos. So the two sons sign here is 5 days after the Psalm chapter 2 World Cup, and 2 days before the composer of the recent album 7 Psalms and his predicted fall. Paul Simon received a prophetic dream in which a voice instructed him to make an album and name it 7 Psalms, because it was pointing to Psalm chapter 2 in this context here. But also the 7 Psalms hints at the 7 trumpets of God's judgment that follow the sound of silence that is observed in heaven, as described in the book of Revelation. Paul Simon's fall and then vegetative state will be a symbolic sound of silence, and of course, the Sound of Silence song launched Paul Simon's career. In Psalm chapter 2, capital S-O-N is mentioned 2 times. In this chapter, God says that he has a son. It's amazing how Jews overlook this. but it's clear. It's more than clear, and it's mentioned twice. So 2 times in Psalm chapter 2. And that's why this Gordie Howe sun's sign is 2 days before Simon's predicted fall. It points to Psalm chapter 2 again. And Simon's recent album is 7 Psalms. All right, this is the update here. Today is August 21st. And again, this video was originally produced 2 days before July 26th. Or rather, the sign. The Gordie Howe sign was on July 24th, 2 days before July 26th, which was the date it was predicted that Paul Simon would fall and injure his head. The prophetic signs that occurred on that date confirmed the analysis, the clear and relevant prophetic signs. And so the prediction was 100% correct. But this is how God's signs works. He'll point to a date, and it isn't necessarily the end of the trail of signs leading to that particular theme and prediction, and instead can be a step that leads to or provides more information leading to the ultimate date, which will be November 28th this year for the predicted fall of Paul Simon and injury of his head. I won't explain, of course, the signs that occurred on July 26th in this video. July 26th is 5 times 5 times 5 days, and that's relevant with the signs that occurred on July 26th to November 28th. In this video, I have mentioned Bridge Over Troubled Water, Simon and Garfunkel's 5th album that won 5 Grammy Awards. I've mentioned the sign, the Gordie Howe sign involving the 2 suns, and it being 5 days after the World Cup that pointed to Psalm chapter 2, which speaks of the word son, capital S-O-N, 2 times. Which is again why we added 2 days from this Gordie Howe sign to the predicted fall of Paul Simon. The Gordie Howe sign, again, being the sign including his 2 sons. So all of the analysis, in other words, is 100% correct. I'm just interjecting the update here, which is that this Gordie Howe sign is 2 days before the signs that revealed adding 5 times 5 times 5 days. And again, Bridge Over Troubled Water is Paul Simon's 5th album with Garfunkel, and it won 5 Grammy Awards. The 5 awards were won at the 13th Grammy Awards, and it is also predicted that this Gordie Howe sign is pointing with 13% of a calendar year to 9/11 this year, on which it is predicted there will be a 13% crash in the S&P index and or another index of the main indexes. This 9/11 will be the 5 times 5 anniversary of when 5 plus 5 hijackers hijacked the 2 planes and drove them into the 2 towers near Wall Street. This 13% of a calendar year is also exactly 7 weeks. This 13%, from the Gordie Howe Bridge sign to 9/11 is 13% of a year to the predicted 13% crash in the stock market. Gordie Howe was a top scorer. He is famous for being an all-time top scorer in the NHL. And in 21 consecutive years of his career, he was a top 10 NHL scorer. 21 is 7 plus 7 plus 7, which is extremely relevant in this context because we are talking about the border wall of security between America and Canada. And in the Bible, the walls of security of ancient Jericho collapsed after the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7, which included 7 trumpets, which is why Trump was a sign on this day of the Gordie Howe sign with his 64-minute speech to the arrogant leftist press, just like Canadians. And the bridge cost $6.4 billion. By the way, there are other adjectives to describe these Canadians, but it really is all part of the same civil war that is ongoing within the US itself. What we have is a culture war between conservatives and liberals, although liberal isn't the correct term for them anymore. And the liberals or progressives, or let's call them leftists in Canada, hate America or are bigots towards their enemies, conservatives, and true Christians, in the same way that bigoted leftist, elitist Californians hate or are bigoted towards flyover country conservatives and Christians. It isn't a culture war per se, it is more precisely a religious war. Unlike prior civil wars, which occur every 80 to 100 years in a cycle, including the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, which was a war that ended up drawing a border across North America, which should never have been formed or drawn, but it was God's plan, partly, incidentally, for the purposes of these prophetic signs that I'm describing right now. But those civil wars are not like the current Civil War. In those civil wars, the two sides, for example, the North and the South, shared common values. They shared a culture. They shared a religion. They shared values. At the end of the day, they could peaceably live together. That is not the case currently. These two sides cannot live together. These two sides today have absolutely nothing in shared values. They share or agree on absolutely nothing of importance. Unlike prior civil wars. But this civil war is leading to the end times. So we can rest knowing that although in the near term, the left will conduct a genocide on their enemies, true conservatives and true Christians, but they will be defeated. They will be removed from the earth at the end of the age, at the second coming. This is a warning. I am trying to help these people. It is time to wake up and remove oneself from the information bubble that they are in, because that's how this civil war is being conducted. through information. The Civil War is an information war, and these people on the left are in a bubble, and it is because of their bigotry. It is because of their hate and bigotry that they refuse, out of some moral sense of superiority and contemptuousness, any information that comes from an alternative source other than their prized leftist sources, the mainstream media, dominated completely by the left, but also women, let's be honest. That's a big part of the current culture war, incidentally, is the war between men and women in our culture today. But that's enough of that subject. It needed to be brought up, I guess, because that is the subject of this video, which is this war that is unfolding in terms of a tariff war, but it is really a manifestation of the culture war and religious war. Make no mistake. The taking advantage of America has been going on for decades, but it is escalating currently, not because of anything financial, really. It could be resolved, but it won't be resolved because of the bigotry and the hatred that is ongoing in the current culture/religious war. Some people will be confused as to why I would call the left a religion, but it is a religion. One does not worship nothing when they stop worshiping the Christian God, the God of the Bible. They worship anything, as Chesterton said. The left worships the state. They worship politics. Politics is their religion, which is why they're fanatics regarding their hatred for Trump, for example. But it's all spiritual. They don't know it, but they're connected spiritually to the spiritual enemy. They are ultimately in rebellion against God. One thing to add to this story here between the US and Canada is that Canada is not a real country. This is a myth. This is a product of the mid-20th century, you could say, with this idea of these nation states that aren't really nations. A nation is a people that can defend itself. Canada cannot defend itself. It relies completely on the US for its defense. If the US didn't exist, there would be no Canada. It would be Chinese right now. But what makes this particularly not hypocritical, it's worse than hypocritical, is the platform, the open platform of the left party of America, of Canada, I should say, openly declaring that they, as part of their platform policy, to be freeloaders on the US for self-defense. That's Canadians. They're freeloaders. And yet they have the audacity to be the way they are and as arrogant and bigoted as they are. And claim some sort of moral superiority when they have this expenditure that they do on communist healthcare that supposedly makes them better and a more enlightened people. Yet they spend nothing on their defense and rely on their neighbor to do that for them. Back before this modern, recent myth of nation states, enforced, or rather seemingly supposedly legitimized by this United Nations, which is a corrupt, evil organization in itself. These places like Canada were considered colonies. It is a colony. It was a former colony of the British Empire, and now it is a colony of the US. It is the 51st state. Trump is correct. He is trumpeting the truth. This line is arbitrary. There is no Canada without the US. And so this tariff war is silly. Because the culture war is silly. The Civil War is silly. There shouldn't be this civil war, but unfortunately it is the case because the one half, anyway, has departed from the God, the Christian God of the Bible that founded these nations, or quote unquote nation in the case of Canada. And so we have a religious civil war that is in the process of being unfolding, and it's all part of God's plan, actually. Paul Simon was born on the date 1013 in the year 41. 41 is the equivalent of the word key in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. The bridge over troubled water event is 1013 days before May 2nd, 2029, when it is predicted that the portal bridge door will be opened to the bottomless pit with a key, as is described in the book of Revelation. This will be the day that Pope Francis is resurrected from the dead through demonic power. So the pit, the bottomless pit, is opened in this prophecy with a key to the door, which is the same symbol as the bridge, because these demons cross over the bridge from the demonic realm into the earthly realm, a portal, which is what a bridge is. It's a portal between Detroit and Windsor, across the water, across the troubled water, which is symbolized by the relations between these two. Well, I hesitate to even, Canada isn't a country. Canada is not a nation. Not only has it decided it doesn't want to be by becoming the first quote-unquote post-national country, it's decided that it would rather fill its borders with the cultures and peoples of all of the world instead of being Canada anymore. That's the left for you. Not only is that the case, but it never was a country. This whole concept of nations is a relatively new one in history. It doesn't date back more than 100 years. It's all post-World War II stuff, this modern concept of the nation state. And incidentally, here's another irony of ironies for you. This World War II order is 100% the result of America. The whole nation state world order wouldn't exist were it not for America. Another reason for the hypocrisy isn't the word, but the attitude of Canadians. I mean, the whole world order of nation states only exists because America exists. The truth is, a nation that can't defend itself is not a nation. It's a sub-unit of the greater empire that it is in. I mean, they used to call these things empires. That's the reality, though. This is a farce. This is a creation, a human invention. It's not reality. Canada cannot defend itself. And furthermore, with its liberal left values, it decided decades ago that it would be, and they admit it, that was the party platform of the Liberal Party in Canada, to be freeloaders on the US. And they literally are freeloaders. And they have all this arrogance and complaints and moral superiority over Americans, and yet they're freeloaders. They take the money they save from spending on defense and funnel it into their government programs and socialism, and call themselves better than Americans. But they're freeloaders. It's disgusting. And the arrogance is the worst part. Anyway, Canada is not a nation. It correctly is a colony. It formerly was a British colony, and they did away with that. That was the reason for Canada's existence in the first place. It was part of the Civil War in the colonies in America between the Loyalists and the Patriots. The losers, the Loyalists, many of them went to Canada. They fled to Canada to remain with the British Empire. Long time after that, they decided they wanted to be an independent country anyway. But their identity was at one time rooted in their Britishness, which of course it's no longer the case, since it's no longer a British culture. It's a world culture. It's a city of Babel culture now. So they no longer have that as their identity. Their sole source of identity is how they are not Americans. And which is essentially dates back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, which was a civil war, of how they are not Americans. They're not like the Patriots. They want to remain with the British, but now they're not with the British. So it doesn't even make any sense anymore. But it is in truth a colony, and it is a part of the protectorate of America. But they freeload, and then they also rip off America in many other ways. And then they complain about it, about any kind of retaliation. I mean, I'm not going to get too much more into the details, but this is just the overview. This is the overview of what's going on, right? The bigger picture is that it is the 51st state. Trump is correct. It is the 51st state. And Trump is also correct when he talks about this line that was drawn across the map as being arbitrary and out of date. It is out of date. This line, what justification is there for that line? Again, Canada can't defend itself. If America needs certain resources, they should be allowed access to it. And of course, anyway, I'm not in favor of, so the irony here too is that the conservative end of the spectrum in Canada is not nationalistic. It's the flip. The left are the nationalists, and it's the conservatives that see it more in practical terms and for what it really is. Okay. So that's the end of this video. I'm going to add a couple more things here. The vast majority of Canadian land on which all of these quote-unquote resources lie is uninhabited. So because of this arbitrary line, these arrogant people on one side of the Great Lakes dictate that they control all of the resources because of that? No. It's not how it should be. And Trump knows that. No one will talk about it plainly as perhaps this video, right? But all of this really is rooted in whether or not one sees America as being God's special nation. And the people on the left do not, and the people on the right do. It is a civil war. And the war comes down to essentially just that. Is America a special nation, or rather, was it a special nation, or however you want to put it? Did, past tense perhaps, God have his hand on America? And the answer is yes. America is God's Gentile nation that he set apart from the rest of the world. Just like Israel. America is an Israel. And God gave America the whole continent. It's America's manifest destiny. The whole continent belongs to God's special nation. And just because of some history where the loyalists didn't want to become or wanted to remain with the British Empire, doesn't mean they get to dictate, because they live on one side of the Great Lake, all of the resources in the rest of the continent. Okay? Especially when they're freeloaders. It's not even a real nation. A real nation is able to defend itself. Period. That's the definition of a nation. It's not this faux nation nonsense of the modern concept of nation, supported by the League of Nations or the United Nations, that says this is a nation. The truth is, you need to defend yourself, and that's the reality of the world we live in. And Canada can't defend itself, and it's chosen not to, and be freeloaders. And like I said, take that extra savings and spend it on socialism, and then call themselves morally superior, etc. And then get to dictate what it can and what the other peoples on this continent of God's special place do with regards to the resources, etc. So Trump is trumpeting the truth. All right, actually, we're just getting started. We've got more information to go here, and it is very profound, and this video isn't nearly complete without this additional information, because more has come to light regarding this Gordie Howe Bridge sign, and how, for example, it is connecting to the predicted date of the stock market crash on this year's 9/11. So again, the number 4 is symbolic of a door or a bridge. We have another very prophetic US-Canada bridge sign, which was on November 22nd, that's a typo, November 22nd, 2023, which was the anniversary of the shooting of John F. Kennedy. So let's explain that. So Kennedy was the 5 times 7th president, the 35th president, which is 5 times 7. And that hints at the vaccine vaccine, which is equal to 57 in simple English gematria. Kennedy was shot in the head and then taken to the hospital, as in healthcare, as in the vaccine, as his vehicle was entering the on-ramp to the I 5 times 7. So the 35th president was killed on the I-35. But 35 is 5 times 7, which hints at the vaccine, which is related to the head. Because it is through the injection that is the mark of the Antichrist that people will become demonically possessed through their heads, through their brains, which is why, symbolically, Paul Simon will injure his brain when he falls. That's why. That's why Paul Simon, Bridge Over Troubled Water, and this theme in this video of him injuring his brain. Now that's another subject. Okay, so let's try to do it quickly here. Paul Simon, his best-selling album, Graceland, is about Elvis Presley's mansion, and Elvis died of a head injury. He also fell. People don't know this. They think that he died from his drug use, but his drug use was him attempting to compensate for his brain injury that he had suffered 10 years earlier. Okay, so now the king's mansion in the 4x4th state, incidentally, hints at King Apollyon, who will rise from the bottomless pit over the bridge through the portal door into the earthly realm, along with his other fallen angels in the end times, as described in Revelation chapter 9, which is why part of the song Graceland, Simon speaks of traveling with his 9-year-old son, and why on the day Elvis the King died, as in King Apollyon, his 9-year-old daughter had just been flown that very same day from the 11th prime state, as in Revelation 9:11, King Apollyon. Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's inauguration on the date 119, which since at Revelation 9:11, King Apollyon. And in the performance, he sang his song American Tune, which sings about Apollo 11. And it was 9 days before Stephen King released his book, The Shining. Apollo 11, 9 days, also hints at Revelation 9:11. King Apollyon, Stephen King. The book, The Shining, is about demonic possession. That's why the opening line of Paul Simon's Graceland song is, "The Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar." Mississippi is the 9 plus 11th state to join the Union. The Delta, the Mississippi Delta, was shining like a national guitar because this is how demonic possession will occur through those who have taken, to those who have taken the SHOT. It will be through the delta brain waves that will be triggered, which will facilitate demonic possession. Okay, so now that's why Kennedy was shot in the head. Okay, and he was shot in a 4-door suicide doors Lincoln Continental. The Lincoln Continental was famous, known for its doors that opened in the opposite direction that doors normally open. They were nicknamed the suicide doors. Okay, 4 of them. And Lincoln was the 4x4th president. And Kennedy was the first of 4 major political assassinations in the 1960s, and the Lincoln Continental reached its peak popularity in the 60s. This Lincoln Continental sign with the shooting of Kennedy in the head was exactly 60 years, as in the 60s, which is also 660 plus 60 months, which ends at 666, the number for the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist, the injection. Before this Canada-US bridge sign, the Rainbow Bridge, in which the car flew into the air in a suicidal crash. It was seen in the media even and being called the suicidal crash because it just seemed to be suicidal and drove right into the customs booth after flying through the air. Which incidentally hints at the coming plane crash of Kamala Harris, but that's another subject. The bridge cost $4 million, and again, the number 4 symbolizes the door in a bridge. It was the rainbow bridge. The rainbow is God's sign in the Bible regarding judgment and the flood. And that's what Niagara Falls symbolizes. Niagara Falls engenders a perennial rainbow. Incidentally, Niagara Falls is a horseshoe, and it's pointed directly at the CN Tower because God is mimicking a game of horseshoes. And that's because God is saying that in the future, Lake Ontario is going to spill out over southern Ontario and kill millions of people in a flood. Because the CN Tower is like the metal spike in a game of horseshoes, right? You can look it up on a map. The horseshoe is directly pointed at the CN Tower. And that's because of what I just said. Now, the people in the car were on their way to a KISS concert. KISS has 4 letters. So the $4 million bridge, KISS, 4 letters. But also the KISS characters are, well, the musicians are known for dressing up like demonic characters, as in demonic possession. And in Revelation chapter 9, which describes the demonic possession, it says that the people who are demonically possessed will wish they were dead and will attempt to commit suicide. Hence the connections here with the suicide doors and the suicidal crash. They'll be attempting to commit suicide for 5 months. Again, Bridge Over Troubled Water is Simon & Garfunkel's 5th album that won 5 Grammy Awards. And their 5th and final album, as in the end times. People will take the mark of the Antichrist because they'll be promised immortality, which God is using Genesis 3:22 to symbolize. That's why we have from the bridge, Rainbow Bridge sign, 3 months and 22 days to the Gordie Howe Bridge sign on July 24th, 2026. Okay, now Gordie Howe wore number 9. And this bridge, Gordie Howe Bridge sign, and God pairs 9 and 44 because the 44th president, the Antichrist, was inaugurated in 09. And Doug Ford gives us again the 4 and the 4, which pairs with the Gordie Howe number 9. But 9 also pairs with 11, of course. And from the Gordie Howe number 9 sign, the bridge sign, it is the 11th prime number, super prime number of days, which is 127. Okay, the 11th prime number is 31. The 31st prime number is 127. So that's a 9 and 11. But this 11th prime number of days is also 4 months and 4 days. And this connects with Doug Ford, 4-4, and on with the other 4s that I've already explained. Now, and this gets us to the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head on November 28th. So, again, the Gordie Howe sign with the Gordie Howe's 2 sons speaking pointed to 2 days later to July 26th, which involved signs that again pointed to this November 28th date, 5 times 5 times 5 days. But it turns out that the Gordie Howe Bridge sign also directly connects to the day that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head, the composer of Bridge Over Troubled Water, November 28th. Okay. Now, Gordie Howe, the Gordie Howe Bridge sign, Gordie Howe was a top 10 NHL scorer for 21 consecutive years. 21 is 7 plus 7 plus 7. The Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. And this is relevant because the bridge between Canada and the US is over the border wall of security. And furthermore, the troubled water aspect of this sign is the current tariff war, and tariffs are about the border wall of security. So this sign that pointed to Gordie Howe, who was the top scorer in the NHL for 7 plus 7 plus 7 years, is exactly 7 weeks, or 7 times 7 days, which is also 13% of a year, to the predicted 13% crash in the stock market on Wall Street, as in border wall of security, on 9/11. The climax to the trucker freedom protest prophetic sign, which was a massive sign. This day, when the Emergencies Act was tabled in the 44th Parliament by the 23rd Prime Minister, the 44th President wore number 23, the basketball president, when he was in high school. This day is 90 weeks or 90 plus 1 weeks, which hints at 9/11, before the Rainbow Bridge sign between the US and Canada, which is again 3 months and 22 days before the Gordie Howe Bridge sign. And that's relevant again because the bridge symbolizes the demons and King Apollyon crossing over into the earthly realm and demonic possession of those who have taken the mark. The injection, which the truckers were protesting, which will promise people immortality, just like technology to heaven, like in the Tower of Babel story without God, that's symbolized with Genesis 3:22, which is why the 3 months and 22 days. And then from there, it's 13% of a year to the 13% crash in the stock market. On the date 9/11, hence the 90 plus 1 weeks connection here. One last thing, the bridge over troubled water sign is also 9 plus 11 weeks before the predicted sinking of US warships in troubled water, the Strait of Hormuz, perhaps the Red Sea or the Gulf of Oman or the Persian Gulf. And again, this bridge over troubled water sign connected with 90 plus 1 weeks from the Emergencies Act. The sinking of the warships will be an emergency. And again, also, when we go back here, like I said, Gordie Howe connected with his death connected to the Gordie Howe sign through the TV show Emergency. Here is perhaps a little bit better of a visual presentation here. Again, we have the climax of the trucker protest on the date that hints at 9/11 because of two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. And then we have this 90 plus 1 weeks exact connection, which hints at 9/11 to the Rainbow Bridge sign, the bridge between the US and Canada over the border wall of security. And again, the trucker protest began along the border wall of security, the 7 times 7th parallel. Anyway, then we get the 32 months and 2 days connection, which hints at Genesis 3:22, and that's relevant because of Revelation 9:11, which describes the demonic possession of those who take the thing that the protesters were protesting. The demons and King Apollyon crossing from the bottomless pit over the bridge into the earthly realm. That gets us to the Gordie Howe Bridge fight sign between the US and Canada over the border wall of security. And this, again, connects with the date 9/11, like I explained, with the 13% crash, hence this connection of 13% of a calendar year. What I didn't mention yet is that the day that the truckers shut down the bridge, the busiest border crossing between the US and Canada, which sits next to the Gordie Howe Bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, was shut down by the truckers on February 7th, 2022, 653 days before the Rainbow Bridge crash sign. 653 is the 119th prime number, which also hints at 9/11 and the predicted crash on this date, as in the crash at the bridge, and also again hints at Revelation 9/11 and the demons that will cross over the bridge into the earthly realm and demonically possess people who have taken the thing that the protesters were protesting. If you are Canadian watching this and you didn't know that the truckers were representing God like they told you they were, now you know. Now you know the truth. Now you know the truth about the so-called VACCINE. It is the mark of the Antichrist, which Bible prophecy says is an abomination. If one takes, they are going to hell, although nowhere in Bible prophecy does it say that one cannot repent after having taken it. This sign and the persecution of the truckers and the closing of their bank accounts pointed to how the left will conduct their politicide genocide on their enemies, true conservatives and true Christians, through rationing food, through digital currency, programmable currency, to the so-called good citizens, the ones who take the mark of the Antichrist, the injections, in the coming food shortage. Which is what was communicated with the Emergencies Act and the closing of the bank accounts. And the reason, and a big reason why you were fooled, is because that's the whole point. The whole big thing here about life, reality itself that God created, is a test between whether one discerns truth or deception. Satan, the ruler of this world, according to the Bible, is his function, his job, is to deceive. Naturally, it is the masses that are deceived, and the minority that remains with God. So you've been deceived. You can forgive yourself though. But you must repent. You were deceived though. Let's be honest though. You were deceived because you wanted to be deceived. Whether you know it consciously or not, you spiritually wanted to be deceived. You loved the lies. You love the lies about Trump and conservatives and every single possible issue, which you are wrong about every single possible issue you can think of. Every single thing of importance that the left believes today is wrong. All of the controversial culture war issues, all of them. And someone on the left is simply someone who has not heard the conservative argument from a conservative, an intelligent one. And in general, conservatives are more intelligent. I know I know what it's amazing, right? Because it's the exact opposite, of course, what they believe. But again, it's all the opposite. And so you need to get out of the bubble of information and stop being so bigoted and arrogant and contemptuous and self-righteous about yourself and those who you deem to be deplorables, etc. The lowlifes, the Trumpers. It's time to stop that. All right, so we have more information here, more update, more prophetic sign information regarding this theme here of the Gordie Howe Bridge and this tariff trade war between the US and Canada. And specifically, it is the breakdown of the negotiations on August 21st, 2026, when the Prime Minister of Canada, called off the talks and walked away from the negotiations, and that, as of right now, was a couple of days ago. So the trail of signs that I have explained that led to the Gordie Howe Bridge sign continues on from the Gordie Howe Bridge sign to August 21st. It is exactly 4 weeks. And if you recall, that's very important because, again, the number 4 symbolizes a door or a bridge. Again, the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a symbol for the door, the symbol for a door, which in God's signs is the same symbolism as a bridge. Because in Bible prophecy, the portal door is unlocked with a key, and the demons cross over from the demonic realm over the bridge into the earthly realm. There's even more reasons that I haven't gone into because it all ties to Paul Simon. And that includes the 4th album with Garfunkel and the 4th solo album. So the 4th album with Garfunkel is the album called Bookends, and it contains the hit song America. The 4th solo album contains the hit song Slip, Slidin' Away. Paul Simon performed 4 days after 9/11. He cold opened the first broadcast of Saturday Night Live, which is broadcast from Manhattan, 4 days after 9/11. He also performed at the 10-year anniversary of 9/11 at the memorial. 10 symbolizes an X, or rather the Roman numeral X is the same as the number for 10. X in God's signs is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which, for those who take it, will facilitate demonic possession through people's brains, which is why Paul Simon will slip, slide, and fall and injure his brain, as in Slip, Slide, and Away, the 4th album, solo album, which is a parallel with the 4th album with Garfunkel, which contains the song America and is titled Bookends, because Paul Simon is symbolic of 9/11. And 9/11, as I'm explaining, points to Revelation 9/11, which is symbolic of demonic possession and the opening of the key to the door and the bridge to the demonic possession. When Paul Simon slips and falls and injures his head, the opportunity for America to repent, which was what the warning of the 9/11 events was, will have slidden away. This will be the symbolism. Again, 4th Garfunkel album, song America, album named Bookends. That opportunity is bookended. The opportunity for America to repent after 9/11 is bookended with symbolically with Paul Simon's slip and fall. The opportunity for America to have repented will have slidden away. And now judgment. More Paul Simon for you. Because the first album, Simon's and Garfunkel's first album, is titled Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. Sound of Silence. There will be a sound of silence in Paul Simon's life when he is in a coma after his brain injury. In Revelation chapter 8, there is a description of a sound of silence in heaven that precedes the 7 trumpets of judgments, hence Paul Simon's 7 Psalms album, which was instructed to Simon to produce through a prophetic dream and a voice, which was, according to Paul Simon's recording, because he framed a piece of paper that he wrote it on after the dream, on the date 1/15. And that hints at Amos chapter 1 with its 15 verses. because famous Amos was the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel, after which they produced Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Wednesday's the fourth day of the week, 3 a.m. In Amos 1 through 15 is a repeating Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4, which means the limit of transgressions has been reached, and which is symbolized by 3, and then 4, it is overflowing and now judgment. Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Paul Simon, famous Amos, the founder of famous Amos Cookies, lured Simon and Garfunkel into his office with a gift of cookies and was the first agent to sign them. And then they produced Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., which ties back into the prophecy in the book of Amos, the first chapter with its 15 verses repeating the idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4. Now, Mark Carney, the name itself is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Mark Carney will be the prime minister during the end times period of the Antichrist, and the mark of the Antichrist, which will engender carnage. Mark Carney, Mark Carnage. The leader of the left in Canada that will participate as a partner in crime with the future President Obama. Anyway, Mark Carney walked away from the trade deal on August 21st, exactly 4 weeks after the Gordie Howe Bridge sign, and exactly 3 weeks before 9/11. That's for 3 transgressions and for 4. Judgment. And where was the 9/11 judgment? In Lower Manhattan. Where is the stock market? In Lower Manhattan. What is this video predicting? A crash on Wall Street in Lower Manhattan on the date 9/11. A 13% crash, and 13 symbolizes America, and that's the name of the song on Paul Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends album. There were 13 colonies at the founding of America. The 4 weeks that connects the Gordie Howe Bridge to the Prime Minister's walking away from the negotiation is also 7 times 4 days, and that too symbolizes America because it was founded on the date 7/4. It is also 4 times 7 days, and that hints at the 47th president, Trump, God's trumpet that he is using to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, including this trumpeting of judgment for Canada and America. Through this breakdown of trade talks initiated by Trumpet. And again, there were 3 sets of 7 that were symbolically enacted before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment, and Trump trumpeted, or rather the trade deal was trumpeted, which is about the border wall of security, tariffs, 3 sets of 7 days before 9/11. And again, part of the 3 sets of 7 is the 7 trumpets that were blown prior to the collapse of the walls of security, which hints at the coming predicted collapse on Wall Street. And Trump famously called into Channel 9 News on 9/11 and inadvertently trumpeted how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan. Just a reminder about the significance of 4. The Rainbow Bridge cost $4 million. The suicidal crash was a car filled with people on their way to, or a couple of people on their way to a Kiss concert, 4 letters. Demonic possession because of the suicidal crash and the characters that make the band Kiss famous for, the demonic characters. 3 months, 22 days, which hints at the mark to the Gordie Howe Bridge sign, the keynote speaker, as in key, as in the key that opens the door, as in bridge, dug forward, as in the letter D, the 4th letter, and forward. Okay. And again, that day is 4 months and 4 days to the predicted fall of Paul Simon. Paul Simon is symbolic of 9/11, and the walking away from the talks with trumpet is 9 times 11 days before the predicted fall of Paul Simon, the composer of Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is the case right now between Canada and America, as it should be. I want to be clear. I don't think I was clear enough earlier. This trade war that is developing, and I hope it gets worse. This trade war that is unfolding, and I'll explain why I hope it gets worse, because it should not be swept under the rug, and certainly the US should not capitulate. I want to be clear. This isn't about trade. And I want to make it clear that what I am saying will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. And again, to be clear, this is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. This isn't about trade. There is a spiritual root to this, as there is with everything. Anti-Americanism, the truth is, the spirit of anti-Americanism is spiritual. Whether it be from Canadians on the left or anywhere else in the world. There's a common root to this, and it is spiritual, and it is rebellion against God. Don't misinterpret my words. I'm not saying that every American is a saint. If you want to be like that, go ahead. Don't listen to me. Scoff. If you would like to be reasonable and think about this, then the truth is the very difficult to explain phenomena of anti-Americanism is rooted in spiritual reality. Like I said before in this video, the big question really is America God's chosen special nation? If it was, well, who are the loyalists in the Revolutionary War? The identity originally of Canada. Well, I'm not saying that all the loyalists were with Satan, but today the left is. And that's the truth. And that's the reason for the irrational hatred that is anti-Americanism. Truly irrational. And I know more than anyone the irrational hatred of Canadians. Not only am I from Canada, but I'm from Eastern Canada, where that anti-Americanism is most heavy. Besides perhaps the West Coast, the left coast as well. Anyway, that's the truth, and it isn't about trade. It is about it's about a culture war, but the culture war itself goes deeper as well, because the culture war is a religious war. And it goes deeper than that because the religious war is a spiritual war. And the truth is, Trump is correct. Canada has been ripping off America for many decades in many different ways. And it's not just freeloading, it also includes with trade. They're very arrogant. And they have gotten away with a lot because Americans have been very generous. The bigger nation, the neighborly nation, I mean, the Canadian auto industry isn't a God-given right. Canadians right now, just to get to one specific, Canadians think they have a right to build the automobiles for Americans. They have an auto industry that wouldn't exist were it not for the deal that the three automakers made to, I guess you could call it, be generous to the Canadians, but it benefited the three automakers in the sense that they could, it's all a racket, right? They were able to import other parts from other nations through the deal without tariffs into the US and on and on. So the thing is that Canada doesn't have a right to these industries. And so for Mr. Doug Ford to threaten to go nuclear, I mean, I'm interested to see that actually play out. It's just interesting. I have no stake in the game. I would go nuclear, okay? Because we know who will win in the end. And it's unfortunate, but Canadians need to learn a lesson. They are not a real nation. It isn't a real nation. It's a like I explained earlier in the video. This is a myth of a modern age. It's just only less than 100 years old, this kind of nonsense. It is a colony. It isn't even a colony. It's just it's an arbitrary thing that was arbitrarily made. It doesn't really exist. And for Doug Ford to be threatening holding back on essential minerals, for example, that happen to be north of the north side of the Great Lake, those minerals don't belong to the people on the North Ridge rim of the lake there, just because. Nations exist, people's societies exist when they can defend themselves. And Canada can't defend itself. I'm not even talking about defending itself against America. It just isn't a real nation. It is part of America. And they would like to pretend and act because of the culture war that they aren't part of America, and abuse America in other ways too. Like, I'll give you another example. There's this thing in Canada where they, to appease, well, it's not even to appease Quebec. So there's a province, or actually I should say part of a province in Canada called Quebec, where they speak French. And a few decades ago, they made it that everywhere in Canada must be bilingual, even though there are no French Canadians outside of this province. And so, for example, if you were on a flight from Calgary to Toronto or Calgary to Vancouver, in the English part of speaking Canada, both destinations, the arrival and destination being English speaking, and there isn't a French person on the plane at all. Every person in the plane is subject to hearing all of the instructions on the plane in English and French. And every single thing that they buy in the store must contain French and English writing on it. And so that's used as an excuse, though, to keep American products out, because they have to relabel everything just to sell it in Canada. It's just one of these things. And that's the real reason, because it's all about a racket and money. One of the big reasons why the English Canadians or English Canada went along with this, or the elites, I should say, is because it benefited their businesses by keeping American products out through this fake bilingualism nonsense. That's another reason, by the way, Canada isn't a real country, because Quebec is a real country, kind of. And I say kind of because Montreal isn't French. Montreal was built by English people, and for many, many, many years, the French stayed off the island of Montreal and were told to remain away from Montreal by their priests. And it was the biggest city. It used to be the biggest financial city, the biggest city, and the capital of industry in Canada until the French took it over. And unlike anywhere else in the Western world, enacted oppressive minority laws, where it was illegal to post signage, for example, or a menu or anything in English, including in Montreal, English-speaking Montreal, which caused the great flight of English speakers from Montreal to Toronto. But Montreal was built by English-speaking people. It's not a French city, but now it is, I guess you could call. It's sort of like a French city now. Anyway, those people of Quebec should have their own country. It should not be part of Canada. And there are these things that other Canadians have had to put up. Like this province has special rights. It has more rights than the other provinces. And that's obviously not appropriate. You can't have that. But Canadians do that. Why? In order to keep this province part of Canada. Why? So that they don't become Americans. That's how much they hate America. They'd rather mix and have this French identity and be subjected to French instructions on an airplane when neither of the destinations are French-speaking, etc. Just so that they can keep this geographic thing called Canada together, which shouldn't exist. If the French in Quebec want to be their own country, let them, and they should be. Canada should break up. The problem with the French thing, though, Quebec, is that it sits in between the Eastern English-speaking provinces and the Western English-speaking provinces. And so the departure of Quebec would mean the end of Canada as it is. And that's the way it should be. And if Ontario wants to be leftist, let it. It shouldn't, it just shouldn't exist. This country shouldn't exist. It is not a real country. And they abuse these arbitrary lines through just the examples I've just described. And they do it with media too. We live in an information age and a media age, and Canadians are extremely protectionist when it comes to this too. They've got all kinds of protectionism, yet when the Americans want to do a little bit of protectionism themselves, they get all crazy. But it isn't about that at all. What it is, like I'm saying, is it's really what's going on right now anyway, is a culture war. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing as the rivalry in hockey. The Canadians just go nuts when they are playing a hockey game against America. And it's rooted in their nationalism and their anti-Americanism. And by definition, in a way, at least for the left in Canada, which is, like I explained, the movement of nationalism in Canada is leftist. It's by definition anti-Americanism. And anyway, the protesting right now regarding the tariffs, that's just a surface level thing that's going on. It goes way deeper, and it goes back decades. It precedes long before Trump, long before Trump. This was coming for a long time. Trump is just bringing it out right now. Finally, that's why I say I hope it gets worse, because it's finally coming out. It's finally going where it should have gone a long time ago, or it's been building anyway. Like, for one thing, it's finally about time that Americans understood that Canadians, at least in Eastern Canada, hate them. Well, I don't know if hate's it's too strong of a word, but it's the same like today, but worse, I guess, with Californians and people from Kansas or something. I mean, the elitists on the coasts really despise and resent Middle America. Well, the same thing with Canadians, right? But that's even funny too, because I mean, you it's not like, Canada is all full of elitists. It's also part of the nationalism and brainwashing. I think that I've spoken enough about this. I just wanted to be clear that this problem of anti-Americanism is really about something else. And this is just surface level. And it is about rebellion against God. That's what it's about. All right, there's one more thing that I wanted to add. I didn't touch upon this subject earlier, which is that these things are cyclical. In other words, this fight that is escalating between the US and Canada is a product of mass social mood. And these cycles of mass social mood repeat every 80 to 100 years, roughly the length of a long human lifespan. And that's why they repeat. Because when the cycle comes around again, the people alive at that time do not have a direct memory to the last time that whatever is going on at that time happened. In other words, what we have in the cycle is a repeating cycle of seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. And the winter seasons are the seasons in which there is a civil war. It is a time for fighting. This is also biblical. There's a time for a peace and there's a time for fighting. And so the times of peaceful relations with others, not just between the US and Canada, but it applies to everywhere, within the US, etc. That's not the time that we are in. And the reason why we are in this particular winter season, which historically has included all-out war, vastly different than wars that occur in other seasons. In a winter season, the war means survival of the society itself, maximum sacrifice by the entire society. That's the war we are in, but every time it comes around, it's different. And this war is a fifth generation warfare, which is being waged with information. But as I alluded to earlier, it is leading to, and I know this because of Bible prophecy and because of wisdom, a politicide, a genocide of the left on their true enemies, their true conservatives and true Christians. And that's manifesting in this war, if you will, between the US and Canada. But like I said, this war has been building for a long time. This predates Trump by many, many years. You could, in fact, at least go back to the 60s, because that's where the two camps of the warring generation split into two, as it always does every 80 to 100 years. The baby boom generation that is born in the spring after the winter season, the season of financial crisis and total war, ends up becoming the generation that is ideological. In other words, the parents in the spring season after the crisis winter season educate and train their kids and this generation to think outside the box, which is exactly what they do. And they end up every summer season producing a cultural revolution. And today we still are living in the cultural revolution that occurred in the 60s. Not much has changed since then, but the 60s radically changed everything. And that's what happens every 80 to 100 years in the summer season. Well, in the winter season, this generation becomes the elders, and they are the ideologues, and that's how they always get us into the society, a total war. And in past winter seasons, it was a civil war. Even World War II was a civil war within the US. I mean, during the time of FDR, the Republicans and Democrats hated each other. But like I said before, in times past, when there was the Civil War, including the actual Civil War in the 1860s, both sides still shared common values, which isn't the case today. It's the opposite. Both camps share absolutely nothing in common and agree on absolutely nothing of importance. And that's because the Civil War today is not over something like slavery. It's over the foundational religion itself. And the left worships things other than the God of the Bible. It worships the environment, it worships the state, it worships politics, it worships health, and on and on. They are the pagans. And it worships women. It worships multiculturalism. Okay, so that's where we are at. And this war between America and Canada that's escalating is just part of that. And so people are in the mood. People are in the mood to fight. That's why they elected their current prime minister, because he promised to fight. That's why that prime minister walked away from the negotiations. That's why on the other side, the US is not putting up with the BS from Canada anymore. But Canadians don't know that the average Canadian isn't even aware of the BS that they've been doing, unless they are conservative and they live maybe in the western part of Canada, and they are more educated and they are more informed as to what's really going on, because they're not brainwashed as much by the government-run news outlet CBC, for example. So people are in the mood for war and don't expect this to de-escalate, because that's the whole point. It's the time for fighting. And that's why I'm saying this really isn't about the tariffs. It's about the mood to fight each other and bring it on, because that's where it should be. It's been a long time coming. These fights need to be had. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit. But importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.